Welcome back to the Love You Sew Patterns channel. We are going to continue with part 2 of the Linda Belt Bag Sew Along. We are going to dive right in from where we left off with part 1 and start at step 36 with taking the lid main and aligning it to the top of the main zipper. What I'm going to add in here is a little trick to help ease in a curve, and this is something that you can do whenever you have a curve. I have basted the curve of the lid with a 1/4 inch seam allowance. You can see I centered the lid and matched up on my Y seam markings. Then you can distribute the fabric from the basting seam more easily in between the center marking and then the dot for the Y seam. After all of the fabric has been distributed evenly, just pin it in place and repeat on the other side of the lid. It's time to baste the lid main to the main zipper with a scant 1/4 inch seam allowance, which just means just a little bit less than a regular 1/4 inch seam allowance. Make sure that all of your fabric is flat and that you do not make any little pin tucks in there. And once you're finished with the basting, you can flip the bag with the lining facing up and take your lid lining and repeat the same steps as in 36 by centering the lid lining over the zipper and then matching up those Y seam. I am working this lid curve without the basting method just to show you that it can be done, and you just have to have a little bit of feel, and obviously I have made quite a few Linda Belt bags to know how much ease to put in the seam. Of course, make sure that those Y seam dots are completely aligned, and this time instead of basting you will sew the seam, and you will go from dot to dot, not from edge to edge, because you will need the space from those dots to create that Y seam. I'm actually sewing pretty slow here. The video is sped up, but it's just to make sure that I can really feel in between the different layers and make sure that I am not accidentally creating any folds or any tucks into the lid, and just making sure that it is nice and flat. Now it's time to notch out the curve of the lid. I like to use my serrated scissors and then notch out each layer separately. So I notched out the main lid and then go back and notch out the lining separately. Then I go back to hand notch with just regular scissors the zipper. Although this seems like a lot of work for notching, making sure that the notches are not aligned is going to help you when you turn the lid out, and you won't accidentally get a hole or some puncturing of the zipper tape that will fray later. Then you take the lid and flip everything right side out and make sure you press well. I'm using a pressing ham to help give the lid some dimension in order to properly press. And now it's time to take your bag over to your machine to top stitch all the way around the main zipper with a 1/8 inch seam allowance. You can see I have the zipper completely open because it allows the sewing to be just a little bit more easy, having to deal with the, and since I used a different fabric for the front main panel, I went back and actually changed my thread to have the thread match the fabric. Again, you can see I'm using a little bit of extra webbing in order to help level out my presser foot to have some nice even stitches and not have any skips with issues in the presser foot being level. And check out those nice even stitches with no skips in between. Now you're going to take the bag with the right side facing up, so the front zipper pocket or the front webbing is going to be facing up at you. Then you will take your back panel main and align the top straight edge to the straight edge of the lid lining. I like to start at the center, making sure that those center points are aligned, and then go back to where the Y seam dots are, and then make sure that everything is eased in from there. Then it's time to head to the machine and sew from dot to dot. Make sure your seam allowance is nice and even, and backstitch well at the beginning and at the end of your seam. Using my awl right now is coming in clutch to help tame all of these layers underneath the machine. Again, with the pouch right side facing up, you want to take your wings and place them right side down with the front. So that means the webbing will be facing down toward the bag. Baste the wings into place. Now you can see that I didn't fully commit to adding the slider and my swivel clasp just yet. I was kind of debating what this length was going to be, so I just left it as is. With the zipper still open, place the front panel main right sides together with the back panel main. Align the centers, the corners, and then ease the rest of the front panel main into place. You can see that I am making sure that the lid is folded and trying to just make sure that that is as flat as possible, so that when we come around to sew it, it won't be troublesome. Now it's time to head back over to the machine and sew all the way around the bag, making sure to avoid the lining. So you will only be sewing the main fabric at this time, and you'll be going again from dot to dot with a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Make sure to backstitch over the wings well. You are going through a lot of layers at this point, and with the interfacing, it can get pretty thick. So make sure you take your time, lengthen the stitch length if needed, and make sure you use your awl to keep everything aligned and flowing through evenly. Make sure that, again, that zipper lid seam is nice and folded, everything is as flat as possible, and you stop at that second dot. The wings are going to get lots of stress as you wear this bag, so don't forget that second row of stitching over top of the wings to make sure that they are secure and in place. Now we're going to move to step 43, where we're going to attach the back panel lining to the lid lining and start the process of closing up the entire lining. So you want to match up those dots on the straight edge, pin into place, and sew a straight line from dot to dot. Now that we have moved on to the machine, you'll notice that as you sew the lining, that top corner right around the lid is pretty tight. Make sure that lid lining is folded down in half so that you can get it as flat as possible. You may want to change to a zipper foot to get tight into that corner, but I'm using my narrow presser foot because it gets me pretty close from there all the way to that second dot. And you know I love my awl to help keep these layers in check. Now with the key fob tucked away so we don't accidentally sew into it, we're going to match up the front panel lining with the back panel lining. And this is going to be the full closing of the lining. So again, you make sure that the lining lid is folded so it's as flat as possible. We match up the darts to each other, making sure that they're nested so that there isn't a ton of bulk, and easing the rest of the fabric into place. As you get ready to sew, make sure that you leave a nice 4-inch opening to turn the bag out later. As we prepare to sew, you'll notice that the bulk in the corner has gotten even thicker. So again, make sure you use a zipper foot to get in close to the Y seam dot, but I am of course trying to use my narrow presser foot in order to be lazy and not have to change it at all. But I am able to do so with a little bit of maneuvering and some careful starter stitches in order to get all that fabric. Then it's time to sew all the way around. The trick here is to first move from that 1/4 inch seam allowance and change into a 3/8 inch seam allowance. This larger seam allowance will allow us to have a lining that won't be bunched up when we turn it out later. Again, make sure to end right at that second Y seam dot so that we can trim the corners and you'll have a nice clean finish later. Make sure you inspect all those corners and make sure that you don't have any odd little pleats and you've hit all of those dots. Now it's time to anchor the lid seams together. So you are going to take the straight edge of the lining and the straight edge of the main fabric of the lids, and you are going to match them together and sew about an 8-inch seam. You don't have to go all the way from corner to corner. That 8 inches is going to be enough to anchor the lids together. And now it's time to trim all of the seam allowances on both the main fabric and on the lining. I trim down the straight edges with scissors and then work the curves with the serrated scissors. At the same time, make sure to cut all of the corners on the pattern, and it's good to go close because you want to make sure that the corners around the lids will be nice and crisp. And now it is the fun part. We get to pull the bag all right side out, and I always like to pull the strap out first and try to get some of that hardware out of the way. And then it's just a matter of pushing and pulling. I try to rotate the bag to make sure that no seams are popped in the process. Grab any tool you like, including your fingers, to help push out the seams, the corners, and especially all of those darts. Help finger press them down first, and then as you work through, make sure you also press with your iron. Then go back to close up the opening in the lining, either with your machine or you can sew it by hand for a nice invisible finish. Here I am just using the machine and sewing the opening shut with a 1/16 inch seam allowance. Then it's time to give your bag one last press to make it look nice, and then you can add in any of your extra hardware, including rivets and snaps at this time. Here I'm showing you how I'm adding these double cap spring snaps. They have a nice black plastic front for that sporty style that I like with this webbing, and I'm using my press to add them all on for a professional finish. Congratulations on your brand new Linda belt bag. Definitely tag me if you are on social media, and I will see you next time.